Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another Instant Deck Tech. So Thursday means it's Tier 1 Thursday, and this week for our Tier Deck Tech, we are heading to Standard to check out the new and updated version of Aetherworks Marvel. This is Naya Aetherworks, recently won Jacob Ba, the SCG Invitational, so congrats to Jacob on his finish with the deck. A quick reminder before we break it all down, if you enjoy this deck and you want to see it made into videos, take a minute, click the like button, the subscribe button, leave a comment, anything you can do to support your deck, because whichever deck is most popular gets a shot at being made into videos next week. So the story of Aetherworks Marvel and Standard is actually really interesting. This was the breakout deck, not as far as winning, but as far as the percentage of people playing it at Pro Tour Kaladesh. Then it kind of faded away to being like 5% of the meta. Then all of a sudden, people figured out how to make Aetherworks Marvel insanely good, and right now it is challenging Blue White Flash as the #1 deck in the format. It's climbed past Green Black Delirium and is almost at 20% of the standard metagame, and the reasons for this are really interesting. So the Pro Tour Kaladesh versions of Aetherworks Marvel, honestly, they played a lot of horrible cards. You were at like the thriving turtle stage where the decks were just 100% in on contingency plans to find your Aetherworks Marvel. Basically, comboing off on turn 4. Your entire deck was built in such a way that you were going to cast an Aetherworks Marvel on turn 4 like 75% of the time, and then you had a ton of huge Eldrazi, so you were going to hit a huge Eldrazi on turn 4 off your Aetherworks Marvel another 75% of the time. So a high percentage of the time, if your opponent couldn't counter your Aetherworks Marvel, you essentially just win the game on turn 4. The problem is people figured out how to beat that. The deck beat itself, I don't know, 25% of the time. Some percentage of the time it would just fizzle and draw the wrong part of its deck. However, it also scooped really hard to counter spells, and it just didn't have a backup plan. Well, the new version, this version we're looking at today, solves all of those problems, and it still can randomly win the game on turn 4, but it can also just play like a real Magic deck, and that's what makes this deck super scary, is it just does everything, and instead of just scooping to a negate or a Void Shatter, this deck can win through almost any hate that's available in the format. So, of course, the big payoff is Aetherworks Marvel lets you cast stuff from the top 6 cards of your library, assuming you have enough energy, into Emrakul the Promised Den. No Ulamogs in the main deck. Instead of playing like 8 Eldrazi or even more in the old versions, this one's just playing the 4 Emrakuls, which means you're not going to always hit a huge Eldrazi. You're not always going to hit an Emrakul when you activate Aetherworks Marvel, but like I said, that's fine because this deck is actually playing a fair game of Magic, or it can play a fair game of Magic, but this is still the payoff, still makes it scary. Your opponent still has to play in such a manner that they don't just lose to Emrakul on turn 4. As far as getting the energy, Attune with Aether lets the deck play only 20 lands, and also fixes the mana, also gains energy. Wood Reaver's Puzzle Knot, if you can cast it and sack it, provides enough energy for an Aetherworks Marvel activation all by its lonesome. Harness Lightning can produce energy, can also kill creatures. Aether Hub also produces some energy. And of course, Servant of the Conduit, which does double duty, makes you a couple energy, also lets you cast an Aetherworks Marvel, for example, on turn 3 instead of on turn 4. Turn 3 Emrakul is pretty absurd. And then, this is where the deck gets interesting. Instead of being overloaded with more fat Eldrazi that you can never cast, and more energy producers that don't really do much except help you activate Aetherworks Marvel, this deck has 6 4-mana Planeswalkers, so your Servant of the Conduit, apart from ramping you into Aetherworks, can also just let you play a turn 3 Chandra, start generating card advantage, killing your opponent's stuff, or in Nahiri, start looting through your deck, and eventually you can search up your Emrakul with Nahiri, with the ultimate, hit your opponent for 13, it comes back to your hand, cast it again, steal your opponent's turn. So it's a really good plan B, gives the deck a ton more resiliency, and then the deck can also use Vessel of Nascency, which is a really sweet card in the deck. As you've seen seen. We have artifacts, we have instants, we have sorceries, we have planeswalkers, Vessel itself is an enchantment, we have creatures. That's a lot of card types. So Vessel, you can crack it, search through your library to find your Aetherworks Marvels, or whatever else you might need, but that also stocks your graveyard, so this deck can legitimately just hardcast their Emrakuls, which was one of the huge problems with the old version. If you drew your Emrakuls, you drew your Ulamogs, they just rotted in your hand, and unless something really crazy happens and the game goes super long, they were pretty much just dead draws, and they weakened your Aetherworks Marvels because you didn't have them in your library to hit with Aetherworks Marvel's ability. So Vessel also generates an energy if you have an Aetherworks Marvel out, but this lets you have a legitimate plan of just hardcasting your Emrakul for like 6 or 7 mana while also digging through your library to find what you need. And then the deck has Ishkana Graft Widow, which, since you have the Vessel to fill your library, will usually have Delirium, makes a bunch of blockers, really stalls out the game, further makes a plan of casting an Emrakul from your hand legitimate, and is just a really powerful threat. And then a Sigarda is awesome mirror tech, since it gives you hexproof, Emrakuls can't steal your turd, and it's a reasonable flyer that can make an army all by itself by exiling stuff from your graveyard. Mana base wise, Game Trails, Evolving Wilds, basic lands. You can get by with 20 lands because you have a Tune with Ether. Also, not pictured here, we talked about the Ether Hubs, which produce energy. In the sideboard, we do have an Ulamog is another Aetherworks Marvel target, a World Breaker, same story, and an additional Sigarda. And then we have Tireless Tracker and Nissa Vital Force, which give the deck a lot of game and kind of control-y, mid-rangey battles, generate a bunch of card advantage, and kind of be able to play a long, fair game. And then we have some stuff for more aggressive matchups, with Kozilek's Return being a Pyroclasm that you can flash back when you cast your Emrakul to Wrath Everything, Tears of Valakut specifically to fight against Blue-8 Flash, kills Avacins and Spellquellers, and Natural State for Smuggler's Copter. And that is the new and improved Aetherworks Marvel deck for Standard, Naya Aetherworks, and this deck is pretty scary, and I expect that it will only get scarier as we get more energy-focused cards in Aether Evil. So keep an eye on this one. I don't think this one's going anywhere. It's going to be good in Standard for a long time because some of these cards are pretty busted. Emrakul, Aetherworks Marvel, Ishkana, the Planeswalkers. It's a combo deck that can win on turn 3 or turn 4 that gets to play real Magic, and that is a deadly combination. So anyway, this has been our Tier Thursday Instant Deck Tech. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon.